welcome back to ABA Exam Review and the continuation of our RBT practice question series. We're continuing today with more questions we'll go through together. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Previously, Conrad would receive praise every time he named a color around his house. Now, Conrad only receives praise every third or fourth time he names a color around his house. Conrad's new reinforcement schedule could be described as what? Few different ways we can go with this question. We're looking at the reinforcement schedule, specifically Conrad's new schedule. We know initially he received praise every time he named a color. When we reinforce or praise every single time a response occurs, we consider that continuous or a fixed ratio 1. When you're reinforcing every response, that is our continuous schedule. That's the only continuous schedule we have. Every other schedule is going to be intermittent. So when Conrad receives praise every third or fourth time, he is now on an intermittent schedule, meaning he's not receiving reinforcement for every single response. So how are we going to describe his new schedule? A, continuous. It's no longer continuous. His first schedule was continuous. It was a fixed ratio 1. Every response was praised. B, is it fixed? It's not. He's getting praised every third or fourth time. So he's going on an average. This isn't a fixed schedule. It's going to be a variable schedule. What about C, intermittent? Yes. Anything that isn't continuous, meaning anything that's not an FR1, is going to be intermittent. And then D, interval. Interval has to do with an amount of time. Is Conrad reliant on time for his reinforcement? No. It's dependent on his responses. Every third or fourth time he engages in the response of naming a color, he receives reinforcement. So Conrad's new reinforcement schedule could be described as intermittent. Tough reinforcement schedule question to start. If you struggled, no worries. Let's pause here, review reinforcement schedules, and then come back. Paul usually does his grocery shopping on Sundays. He decided he would try a different store than his usual store this weekend because it was closer to his house. Paul showed up at the store, started to pick out his usual items, but all the items were nearly double the price. Paul never went back to that store. Why? First, let's look at Paul's behavior. Question is asking about why Paul never went back to the store. Was Paul's behavior reinforced or punished? Well, it was punished, right? Because Paul going to that store decreased. He never went back. But for some reason, Paul going to that store was punished. Now, what punished Paul? So he went to this different store than he usually does because it was closer. When he showed up to the store and started to pick items, the consequence was these items all had nearly double the price. So Paul shows up at the store, he starts to pick out his items, and the consequence is he sees all these prices that are nearly double what he's used to. So these expensive items, these expensive prices that's the consequence has been added as a result of Paul picking out items at this new store. So Paul's behavior was punished. The consequence was the added expensive prices. So positive. Put that together, what do we get? Well, A and B are both reinforcement. Paul's behavior decreased. It can't be reinforced. Remember, reinforcement increases, punishment decreases. So it has to be C or D. We know it's going to be C, right? Because the consequence is the addition of these expensive prices. Paul was positively punished, meaning he's never going back to that store. Why? C, positive punishment. Functional behavior assessment determines that your client's behavior occurs to receive toys and other items from his parents. When selecting a replacement behavior, what should we be sure of? All right, we're talking about replacement behaviors here. When we decrease certain behaviors, we have to teach other behaviors to take their place because behaviors serve a purpose, they serve a function. If we're going to take that away, we have to replace it with something. So when selecting a replacement behavior, what do we need to be sure of? In this case, the client's behavior occurs for toys and other items. So it's a tangible that this client is seeking. What do we need to make sure of? A, the behavior has a different function. Our replacement behavior needs to meet the same function. It needs to be functionally equivalent. So B is correct. We don't want to pick a behavior that serves a completely different function if we're getting rid of something else that meets a different need. Think about function sometimes in terms of need. What need is the client meeting here? This way he's getting toys and other items. If we're going to take that away and get a replacement behavior, it has to be B, functionally equivalent. Now, what about C? The behavior has the same topography. Does topography equal function? Meaning, just because a behavior looks a certain way, does it mean it's functioning a certain way? No. Topography and function are not interrelated. Behaviors can look very different and function the same way. So our replacement behavior can look different than the old behavior as long as it's meeting the same function. So when we're selecting a replacement behavior, we need to be sure the behavior is functionally equivalent. A behavior technician is only able to provide parent training on their own under what conditions? Think about your job and role as a RBT. It is to implement plans and collect data. Now, some RBTs sometimes do provide parent training on their own. And under what circumstances are you allowed to provide parent training by yourself? A, you've demonstrated the competence needed to provide training. That's number one. You have to be competent enough to provide the training. And many RBTs are. That's number one. You have to be competent. Whatever you do in this field, you have to demonstrate competence first. B, have prior approval from the supervising analyst. Absolutely. As the RBT on the case, you can't just provide parent training on your own, right? On your own account. You have to get approval first. C, the stakeholder has agreed to parent training. Yes, you can't just show up and assume the parent wants parent training or needs parent training or wants it from you. So there are many things you need to do as an RBT before you provide parent training on your own. You got to remember what the primary role is of the RBT. It's to implement plans, collect data. If you're competent enough and the stakeholder agrees and you get prior approval from your supervising analyst, then and only then can you provide parent training under your own power. Jules is undergoing teaching observations today, an administrator observing her classroom and then providing Jules with feedback on her teaching practices. Following the class, the administrator tells Jules she loved the class, but wish Jules would speak louder. The administrator is focused on what? So we're looking at the administrator. And what is the administrator doing here? Well, he's observing Jules teaching. He's going to give her feedback. The administrator tells Jules the class was great. She loved the class, but she wants Jules to speak louder. Now, when we talk about things like being louder, being quieter, being stronger, being weaker, taller, shorter, what are we talking about? Are we talking about function, topography, or magnitude? Well, we're talking about magnitude. These are all our magnitude words, the intensity words. When we want somebody to speak louder or try harder, right? Or get stronger, we're talking magnitude. We're talking intensity. We're not talking about the function. Jules doesn't need to change the function of her speech. Jules doesn't need to change how her speech looks. She needs to change the C, magnitude. Magnitude is often neglected, but it can be an important part of, let's say, shaping if we've already got the behavior we want. Like Jules is already a good teacher. She's a good speaker. She just needs to change the little aspect of speaking louder. This is when magnitude comes into play. So the administrator is focused on C, magnitude. Bob is watching Pablo paint a house. Whenever Pablo draws a line or an angle, Bob draws the same line or angle on his canvas immediately after Pablo draws his. Bob is doing what in this scenario? All right, we're focused on Bob and what he's doing. So we know Bob is watching Pablo. When Pablo draws a line or an angle, Bob draws the same line or angle on his canvas immediately after Pablo draws his. Now, there are many ideas behind modeling and imitating, but as RBTs, keep it simple, right? We want to know the basics. And the basics are the model performs a skill, the imitator immediately copies that skill. In this case, is Bob the model or is he the one doing the imitating? Well, Bob's doing the imitating, right? He's watching Pablo paint a house. Pablo draws a line. Bob draws the line. Pablo draws an angle. Bob draws an angle. Pablo's the model. Bob is doing what? Bob is imitating. We're not talking chaining here, and we're not talking shaping. Fluency is so important because chaining and shaping have nothing to do with what this question is asking. If you're fluent, then chaining and shaping aren't even options here. You're not even worried about those. You're merely worried about identifying, is Bob our model or is Bob the one doing the imitating? And we know Bob is imitating in this scenario. Thank you for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. When you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.